Rain fell like it had a grudge against the city. Nia stepped through a revolving door she was never meant to touch, just to steal 5 minutes of warmth. Before we begin, take a moment to comment your city and your local
What
time.
happened in there was a
I read them
travesty
all.
of justice,
And if
but I
stories
am
about
determined
dignity,
to fight
fairness, and
this.
real accountability matter to you, hit like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Nia's shoes were damp through the soles. Her coat was too thin for January, the kind that looks respectable from a distance but tells the truth up close. The lobby smelled like polished stone and money. Warm air pushed against her face like a hand. In the corner, a Christmas tree still stood in quiet denial, half lit, a few ornaments missing, as if even the decorations had been audited. 2 security guards were stationed by the desk, not the bored kind, the trained kind. Nia lowered her chin and kept her steps calm. It was always the same calculation. Walk like you belong, and most people will do the work of believing you. She wasn't here to steal. She wasn't here to beg. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here because the wind outside cut like a blade, and the bus shelter had filled up with men who watched her too long. And because, if she was honest, she'd also come here for the faint hope of something else. A miracle. The lift doors gleamed at the far end of the lobby. A little island of quiet. She could ride it up and down once, maybe twice, warm her hands, let her fingers stop shaking, then step back out before anyone decided she didn't match the building. She pressed the call button. A soft chime. The doors opened. Inside, a man in a dark suit stood angled to the panel, like he was guarding the numbers. He was built like a doorframe, with a close-cropped haircut, and the kind of posture that came from making other people feel small for a living. His eyes flicked to her, then to the lobby behind her. Then he leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. "Ma'am," he whispered, voice smooth as oil, "you shouldn't be here." Nia's breath caught, not because he was right, because he said it like he knew her. The doors started to close, and then, at the last second, a hand slid between them. The lift reopened with a reluctant sigh. A second man stepped in. No entourage, no noise, no performance. Just a tall figure in a charcoal coat, rain beating on his shoulders, his tie slightly loosened like he'd already fought today's battle and won it. His face was the kind people recognized without knowing why. The kind that ended up on screens in airports and business channels. Calm eyes, hard jaw, not pretty, powerful. He nodded once at the suited man already inside, a silent acknowledgement of rank. Then his gaze moved to Nia, and in the instant his eyes met hers, something shifted. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was recognition, like a door in his mind opened and cold air rushed in. Nia felt it too, the way his pupils narrowed, the way his attention sharpened, like he had just read a headline only he could see. The suited man cleared his throat, leaning closer to Nia again, still whispering. "Step out now," he said, "before you make this harder." The powerful man's voice cut clean through the lift like a blade through silk. "Richard," he said, calm, "why are you whispering to her in my lift?" Richard straightened immediately, like he'd been yanked on a string. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "we have an unauthorized person in the building." Mr. Sterling, Caleb Sterling, CEO of Sterling Meridian Group, the kind of corporation that owned hospitals, pharmaceutical patents, security contracts, and enough influence to make politicians smile like puppets. Nia's stomach tightened. Of course it had to be him. Of course the one building she chose to hide in belonged to the one company that had swallowed her life whole. Caleb's eyes stayed on Nia, not like she was a threat, like she was a missing page. "Unauthorized," he repeated. "Is that what she is, Richard?" Richard's jaw flexed. "Yes, sir. She needs to leave." Nia opened her mouth, but the words stalled in her throat. She could explain. She could apologize. She could do what she'd done 100 times in 100 places. "I'm sorry, I was just cold." But she didn't. Because Caleb Sterling kept looking at her like he already knew the ending of this story, and he didn't like it. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. Nia hesitated. Names had power. Names could get you followed. Names could get you pulled into rooms you didn't come out of the same. But she saw something in his face that she hadn't seen in a long time. A crack. Curiosity mixed with discomfort, like he just realized he might be standing on a floor that wasn't as solid as he thought. "Nia," she said quietly. "Nia Holloway." Richard's eyes flashed. Just a flicker. Just enough. But Caleb caught it. Caleb's gaze slid to Richard. "Do you know her?" "No, sir," Richard said too fast. The lift hummed as it rose, smooth and silent, climbing through wealth. Caleb looked back at Nia. "Are you here for someone?" Nia swallowed. "No." Richard exhaled through his nose, impatient, already reaching for his radio. Caleb watched him, then looked back at Nia. "Then why are you here, Miss Holloway?" Nia's hands curled inside her coat pockets, fingers finding the rough edge of a seam she'd stitched herself. The inside lining felt thicker on one side. She kept her voice steady. "Because it's warm," she said. "Because outside it's not safe. And because I needed to see if the world still had doors that opened." A pause. The lift slowed. Then Caleb did something that surprised both of them. He didn't order her out. He didn't call security. He didn't hand her off to Richard like a problem. He pressed the button for the top floor. Richard's head snapped toward him. "Sir, that floor is restricted." Caleb didn't look at him. "I know." The lift continued upward. Nia stared at the numbers ticking higher, her heart beating too loudly in her ears. Caleb spoke again, soft but firm. "Richard," he said, "when was the last time you reviewed sealed files tied to Meridian compliance?" Richard's throat bobbed. "Sir?" Caleb's eyes stayed on the doors, like he was watching his own reflection in them. "I'm asking a simple question." Richard forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Those are handled by legal, sir, not security." Caleb nodded slowly. Then he turned to Nia again. "Have we met?" he asked. Nia almost said no. It would have been easier, but the truth sat heavy behind her tongue. "No," she said, "but you've seen me." Caleb's expression tightened. "Where?" Nia stared at the floor. "In a file," she said. "A file you were never supposed to see." The lift doors opened onto a hallway that looked like quiet thunder. Thick carpet, glass walls. A city view so wide it felt like the building owned the sky. Richard stepped forward, ready to block Nia's path. Caleb held up one hand, and Richard froze. Caleb looked at Nia. "Come with me." Nia's feet moved before her brain caught up. She followed him past offices that smelled like leather and espresso, past art that cost more than her old car, past people who glanced up and then looked away quickly, as if eye contact could become evidence. They reached a set of double doors. Caleb pushed them open. His office was not flashy. It was controlled. A wide desk, a wall of glass, a few carefully chosen photos, a framed certificate, a small sculpture that looked like a storm trapped in metal. Caleb gestured to a chair. Nia sat, still holding her coat closed like armor. Richard remained near the door. Caleb didn't sit. He walked to a cabinet, punched in a code, and pulled out a thin folder. Nia watched his hands. His fingers didn't shake. But something in his breathing changed. He opened the folder. The first page was a photo. Nia at 26, hair pulled back, eyes tired but steady, standing outside a courthouse beside a man in a worn suit. The man was smiling. Dr. Elias Monroe, the whistleblower. The one they said was unstable. The one they said was angry. The one they said was trying to extort. The one who, 2 weeks after he tried to speak, was found dead in a car fire that investigators called an accident. Nia's throat tightened like a fist. Caleb stared at the photo as if it had just appeared. Then he looked at Nia. "This file," he said, voice low, "was sealed 8 years ago." Nia nodded. Caleb's jaw clenched. "I never saw it." Nia let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's the point," Richard shifted. "Sir, with respect, this is not appropriate. She needs to be escorted out." Caleb didn't turn. "Richard, stop talking." Silence. That's when Nia realized something. In this room, Caleb Sterling was the sun, and Richard was only powerful when the sun allowed it. Caleb flipped to the next page. A summary. Project Meridian. An internal program tied to clinical trial results and hospital procurement. A whistleblower complaint. A list of names. Nia saw one that made her stomach drop. Richard Vance, security chief. Involvement, risk mitigation. The words were polite, corporate, but Nia knew what they meant. Intimidation, surveillance, pressure, making problems disappear. Caleb looked at Richard for the first time since they had entered. Richard's face was composed, but his eyes were loud. "Sir," Richard said, "that file is outdated. It was investigated. It was resolved." Caleb's voice was quiet. Was it resolved, or was it buried? Richard's smile tightened. "Legal handled it." Caleb looked at Nia. "You were connected to Dr. Monroe." Nia's hands trembled slightly. She forced them still. "I worked in records at Mercy Ridge Hospital," she said. "I flagged anomalies in billing and supply orders. I thought it was a mistake. Then I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "And Elias?" "He was a pharmacist," she said. "He saw the medication swaps, the cheaper generics labeled his brand, the dosage changes, the trial data massaged, people's pain turned into profit." Richard cut in, sharp. "This is nonsense." Caleb's gaze snapped to him. "I told you to stop talking." Richard's jaw flexed again. Nia kept going, voice steady now, because once you start telling the truth, it becomes a river. "We tried to report it," she said. "Internal channels, compliance, the hotline, the forms, the meetings where they nod and write nothing down." Caleb glanced at the file again. "It says here Elias was terminated for misconduct." Nia's laugh was bitter. "That's what they wrote." Caleb's eyes lifted. "What happened?" Nia swallowed. The memory came back like smoke. "People started following us," she said. "He got calls in the middle of the night. He found his car moved like someone had been inside it. I was told, politely, that I should focus on my own future." Caleb's face stayed controlled, but the muscles around his mouth tightened. "And then," Nia said softly, "Elias died." Silence settled. Rain tapped against the glass like a slow drum. Caleb flipped further. An incident report. A conclusion. Accidental. No further action. Sealed. Caleb stared at the page as if it offended him. Then he looked at Nia again. "Why are you here tonight?" Nia's fingers pressed into the seam of her coat lining again. "Because," she said, "someone called me." Caleb's eyes sharpened. "Who?" Nia hesitated. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a cheap phone with a cracked screen. She held it out. On the screen was a missed call. No name, just a number. Caleb took the phone, glanced at it, and handed it back. "Why didn't you call back?" "I did," Nia said. "It went nowhere, but I got a text." She tapped the screen and turned it toward him. One line. "You were right. The file is not gone. Come to Sterling Tower, lift 917. Caleb looked at Richard. Richard's face was still, but his eyes flicked just once to the door like he was measuring distance. Caleb saw it. Caleb placed the folder down, slowly, like it was fragile. Then he spoke, calm as ice. "Richard," he said, "hand me your access badge." Richard blinked. "Sir?" "Now." Richard's mouth opened, closed. He let out a controlled breath and reached for the badge clip to his belt. He handed it over. Caleb took it, studied it, then placed it on his desk like a verdict. "You're suspended," Caleb said. "As of this moment." Richard's face tightened. "Mr. Sterling, you can't do this off a rumor." Caleb's voice didn't rise. "I can do whatever my signature allows, and it allows quite a lot." Richard's eyes flicked to Nia now, and the air in the room changed. Not violent, but sharp. Caleb stepped between them without even thinking. Nia noticed it, a small move, a big message. Caleb pressed a button on his desk. "Paige, I need legal and compliance in my office, now." A woman's voice came through the speaker. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." Caleb turned to Nia. You came here because someone wanted you in the lift. Nia nodded. Caleb's eyes narrowed. That wasn't an accident. Richard's voice went hard. Sir, you're being manipulated. Caleb stared at him. By her or by you? Footsteps approached. The door opened. A woman entered, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Paige, his executive assistant. Behind her, 2 men and a woman, faces cautious like they'd been pulled out of meetings that mattered. One of them, a black woman with graying braids pulled into a neat bun, looked at Nia and froze. Her eyes softened. Ms. Holloway? She whispered. Nia stared. Then recognition hit her like a wave. Ms. Carter, Nia said, stunned. You were in compliance. The woman stepped forward slowly, as if the room might punish her for moving. I was, she said, before they transferred me. Caleb looked between them. You know each other. Ms. Carter nodded, careful. I tried to escalate her report. I wrote memos. I saved copies. Then I was told I was being reassigned for my own career development. Caleb's gaze snapped to the legal team. Who authorized the sealing of this file? One of the men cleared his throat. That was before your tenure as CEO, sir. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Answer the question. The man looked uncomfortable. Former general counsel, signed off with risk management. Caleb glanced at Ms. Carter. And security involvement. Ms. Carter's face tightened. Yes. Richard stepped forward. Sir, this is becoming a spectacle. Caleb didn't look at him. Good. Then Caleb turned back to Nia, voice steady. Tell me what you have, he said, and tell me what you want. Nia's throat tightened. What she wanted. What did she want? 8 years ago, she wanted Elias alive. 6 years ago, she wanted someone to believe her. 3 years ago, she wanted to stop looking over her shoulder. Tonight, she wanted to stop being cold. But deeper than that, she wanted something that had been stolen from her. Her name, her dignity, her future. I have something, she said slowly. But it's not here. Caleb's gaze sharpened. Where? Nia swallowed. In a place nobody looks, because nobody thinks someone like me can plan. Richard scoffed. This is absurd. Caleb's eyes flashed. Richard, leave. Richard's face hardened. Sir, you're making a mistake. Caleb stepped closer, voice low enough to make the room lean in. If I'm making a mistake, he said, it's that I trusted the wrong man to stand between truth and the company. Richard's eyes darkened. For a moment, Nia felt the old fear rise. Then Caleb straightened. Paige, he said, call HR and call the board chair. Tell them the security chief is removed pending investigation. Paige didn't blink. Yes, Mr. Sterling. Richard's voice rose. You can't just remove me because a trespasser tells you a bedtime story. Caleb looked at him, calm. You're not being removed because of her story, Caleb said. You're being removed because you reacted to her name before you even knew why she was here. Silence. Richard's face drained slightly. Caleb turned back to Nia. What do you have? Nia took a breath. A file, she said. A deleted file. One of the lawyers scoffed quietly. Deleted files don't exist. Nia's eyes locked on him. Tell that to search results. Caleb's brow furrowed. Explain. Nia's fingers went to her phone again. I looked up Elias's case on public records. Nothing. I looked up the trial, sealed. I looked up my own name, redacted. She swallowed. But one night in a library, I typed the project code into an old search engine. Something popped up, a cached link, a title, and for 2 seconds before it vanished, I saw the beginning of a document, enough to know someone tried to erase it. Caleb leaned forward slightly. What did it say? Nia's voice went quiet. Audio transcript, she said. Internal call. A man laughing, saying, make it look accidental. The room went cold. Ms. Carter's hand rose to her mouth. The lawyers exchanged glances. Caleb's face didn't move, but his eyes changed, like he had just stepped onto a bridge and felt it shift under his weight. You're sure? Caleb said. Nia nodded. I didn't imagine it. Caleb looked at Ms. Carter. Can a deleted file still show up in search results? Ms. Carter hesitated. If it was indexed, she said, and cached, or if someone kept a copy somewhere connected. Caleb's gaze slid to the security logs in the file, or if someone never truly deleted it, just hid it. Richard's voice cut in, desperate now. Sir, this is beyond her, beyond all of us. You don't know what you're pulling at. Caleb turned to him slowly. You're right, Caleb said. I don't know. He stepped toward Richard. But you do. Richard stared back, jaw tight. Caleb's voice stayed calm, but every word landed heavy. So here's what's going to happen, Caleb said. You're going to sit in a room downstairs, and you're going to answer questions. And if you refuse, I will have external investigators here before the sun comes up. Richard's lips curled. You think you're safe because you're the CEO? Caleb's eyes narrowed. No, I think I'm responsible because I'm the CEO. Then Caleb turned away from Richard like he wasn't worth the air. He looked at Nia. I'm going to ask you a question, he said, and I need you to answer honestly. Nia nodded. If we open this, Caleb said, and it's real, it will hurt people. It will shake the company. It will cost billions. It might cost me this seat. He paused. Why should I believe you? Nia's throat tightened. She looked at the city through the glass. All those lights. All those lives. All those people who never knew what decisions were being made above them. Then she looked back at Caleb. Because, she said, if I wanted money, I would have taken a settlement years ago. If I wanted revenge, I would have shouted. If I wanted pity, I would have cried in your lobby. She leaned forward slightly. I'm here because someone died, she said, and the people who did it learned they can do anything if they speak calmly enough. Caleb held her gaze, and in that moment, Nia saw something she had not expected to see in a man like him. Shame, not for himself, for the system he benefited from without checking the receipt. Caleb nodded once, slow. All right, he said. We do this properly. He turned to the legal team. Freeze everything, Caleb said. No more deletions, no more access changes, lock down the servers, pull badge logs for the last 10 years. Any attempt to alter anything gets flagged directly to me. One of the men hesitated. Sir, protocol requires board approval. Caleb stared at him until the man looked away. I'm the protocol, Caleb said quietly. Tonight? He looked at Paige. Bring in an external firm, Caleb said. Not one we've ever paid. Paige nodded. Yes? Caleb turned to Ms. Carter. I want you in the room when we review the sealed file, he said. Ms. Carter blinked. Sir, they transferred me to vendor relations. Caleb's mouth tightened. They wasted you. Then he looked back at Nia. And you, he said, you're not leaving this building alone. Nia's breath caught. The last time someone said those words to her, it came with a threat. But Caleb's voice was different. It was protection, not possession. Still, she didn't trust easily. I don't need saving, she said quietly. Caleb nodded. I'm not trying to save you. He held her gaze. I'm trying to stop whoever tried to erase you. The next few hours moved like a storm that had been waiting behind a dam. Rooms opened that had never opened for Nia before. A small conference room off the executive corridor, glass walls turned opaque with a switch, screens lit up with timelines, codes, access logs, email trails. People spoke in careful sentences, as if the wrong word might trigger a trap. Nia sat at the end of the table with a paper cup of tea she didn't ask for and hands that still wanted to shake. Caleb was not kind. He was focused. There was a difference. He didn't comfort her with empty phrases. He asked questions. He listened. He wrote notes. And every time someone tried to gloss over something, he stopped them. No, Caleb said more than once. We're not skipping that part. At 11:48 p.m., Paige returned with a name. The number that texted her, Paige said, is linked to a prepaid account, but it pinged a tower near our Jersey data center. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Who has access to that center? Ms. Carter answered. Security, IT, and vendor contractors. Caleb looked at Richard's name in the file again. Then he stood. I want to see Richard, Caleb said. One of the security guards, not Richard's men, nodded and left. Nia's chest tightened. She didn't want to be in a room with Richard again. Not because he could hurt her physically, because men like that hurt you with paperwork, with whispers, with decisions made in hallways. Caleb glanced at her. You don't have to be in that room, he said. Nia swallowed. For years, people had decided things about her without her. She had been pushed out of rooms, out of jobs, out of her own narrative. She looked up. Yes, she said, I do. A few minutes later, they entered a security office on a lower floor. Richard sat in a chair like he was still in charge of something. He looked up at Caleb, then at Nia. His smile was thin. I told you, he said softly. You shouldn't be here. Nia's hands curled, but she kept her face calm. Caleb stood across from him, arms relaxed. You engineered this, Caleb said. Richard chuckled. Engineered what? The lift, Caleb said. The text, the timing. Richard's eyes glittered. You think I lured a homeless woman into your building to what? Confess. Caleb leaned forward slightly. I think you wanted to see how I would react to her. Richard's smile faded. And you reacted badly. Caleb's eyes stayed calm. No, Caleb said. I reacted honestly. He pulled the sealed file from a folder and placed it on the table. Richard's gaze flicked to it, then away. Caleb watched him like a scientist watches a lie. You were named, Caleb said, in a sealed whistleblower case. Your involvement was described as risk mitigation. Richard's mouth tightened. Security protects the company. Caleb nodded. From what? From criminals or from truth? Richard's eyes narrowed. Truth is a luxury word, Mr. Sterling. It means whatever keeps the lights on. Nia felt anger rise hot and heavy. Caleb held up a hand slightly, not to silence her but to steady the room. Caleb's voice went quiet. Elias Monroe died, he said. Did you have anything to do with it? Richard's jaw flexed. He leaned back slow. Careful, he said. You're stepping into places that step back. Nia's stomach tightened. There it was. The threat, wrapped in a warning. Caleb didn't flinch. Answer, Caleb said. Richard's eyes slid to Nia again. You want a story, Richard said. Here's a story. Your company was bleeding. People were going to prison. Investors were going to flee. Hospitals were going to cancel. Thousands of jobs were at risk. He tapped the table lightly. And then a man decides he wants to be a hero. He smiled, cold. Heroes get people hurt. Nia's voice came out steady, despite the tremor in her chest. He wasn't a hero, she said. He was a pharmacist who didn't want patients poisoned. Richard laughed softly. You think patients matter to shareholders? Caleb's eyes went sharp. Richard, Caleb said, the only reason you're still breathing calmly is because you think your power is permanent. Richard's smile faded. Caleb continued. It's not. He slid a printed sheet across the table, a screenshot, a search result, a cached title, a document link. Richard stared at it. For the first time, his composure cracked, not fully, but enough. Caleb watched him. You know what this is, Caleb said. Richard's throat bobbed. That's not evidence, Richard said too quickly. Caleb nodded. Not yet, but it's a footprint. He leaned closer, voice low. And footprints lead somewhere. Richard's eyes flicked toward the door. Caleb straightened. Here's what's going to happen, Caleb said. You're going to tell us who else was involved, who deleted what, who ordered what, who signed what. Richard stared at him. And if you don't, Caleb added, you're going to be the man who took the fall for everyone above you. Richard's lips parted slightly. Nia saw it. A fear he couldn't disguise. Not fear of jail. Fear of being abandoned by the people he protected. Richard leaned forward a fraction, voice lowering. You think the board didn't know, he said. You think legal didn't know. You think you were the only innocent man in the room. Caleb didn't blink. Tell me names. Richard smiled, but it was bitter now. You want names, he said. Start with your former general counsel. Start with the procurement VP. Start with the trial director who got promoted the week after the complaint. He tilted his head. And start with the politician who took donations and called it community outreach. Ms. Carter inhaled sharply. Page's eyes widened. The lawyers looked like they wanted to disappear. Caleb's face stayed calm, but his eyes went darker. "Write it all down," Caleb said to Page. Richard's voice went quieter, almost pleased. "And Mr. Sterling," he added, "if you pull hard enough, you might find your own fingerprints on the rope." Nia's stomach tightened. That was the next hook, the next question. Was Caleb truly separate from this, or was he just the new face on an old machine? Caleb stared at Richard, then turned away without another word. Outside the room, Nia walked beside Caleb down a corridor lit by soft ceiling lights. Her heart was pounding. She wanted to ask 100 questions. She wanted to scream. She wanted to sit down and cry for Elias and all the time stolen. But she kept walking. Caleb stopped near a window overlooking the river. He didn't look at her right away. "When I took this job," he said quietly, "I told myself I was here to change things." Nia waited. He continued. "I told myself I could modernize, clean up, build something better." He finally looked at her. "And I never asked what had already been buried to keep the building standing." Nia's voice was soft. "People like me ask those questions, and we pay for it." Caleb nodded, once. "Not this time," he said. At 1:12 a.m., the external investigators were on a call. At 2:30 a.m., Caleb had ordered a full preservation of records, independent oversight, and direct reporting to him and an external compliance monitor. At 3:05 a.m., Ms. Carter found something that made her hands shake, a server log, a deletion request, not 8 years ago, 3 weeks ago. Someone had tried to wipe remnants again. Caleb stared at the timestamp. "Why now?" he murmured. Nia's stomach tightened. Because someone knew she was still looking. Because someone knew she might come back. Because someone had seen the same search results she had. And panicked. That's when Page returned with another detail. "The prepaid number," Page said, "was topped up at a corner shop in Newark." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Can we get CCTV?" Page nodded. "We're trying." Ms. Carter spoke, voice tight. "If someone is still cleaning up," she said, "then someone is still afraid." Nia's hands clenched. The truth wasn't just history. It was present tense. At this point, if you're still with me, drop a comment saying, "Truth," if you've ever watched powerful people try to erase a story and you promised yourself you would not let them. Because what happened next was the moment everything changed. It wasn't in a boardroom. It wasn't in court. It wasn't on the news. It was back in the lift. Caleb told Nia he needed to retrieve something from his private office safe, a separate one, older, that only he accessed. He asked her to come with him. Ms. Carter insisted on coming too. They stepped into the executive lift together, the same one Nia had used to escape the cold. The doors began to close. And then, at the last second, Richard Vance appeared. He had slipped past a junior guard. He stood at the threshold, calm again, like a man who refused to accept being reduced. "Mr. Sterling," Richard said, voice smooth, "we should talk." Caleb stared at him. "You shouldn't be here." Richard's lips curled. "Funny, that's what I told her." Nia's chest tightened. Richard's gaze flicked to her. "Enjoying the penthouse," he said quietly. "Feels different when you're invited." Caleb's voice went low. "Step back." Richard didn't. Instead, he leaned in slightly, like he was speaking a secret. "You think you can fire me," Richard murmured, "and the machine stops." He smiled, small. "It doesn't stop," he said. "It just chooses someone else." Nia felt fear rise, not for her body, for the future, for the way systems self-heal. Caleb's eyes stayed on Richard. Then Caleb did something so simple it felt like a thunderclap. He reached up and pressed the emergency stop. The lift jolted slightly and paused between floors. The lights stayed on. The air stayed calm. But the message was clear. No stage, no audience, just a boundary. Caleb looked at Richard, voice quiet and deadly calm. Look at me, Caleb said. Richard did. Caleb continued. You have spent your career controlling rooms, Caleb said, controlling stories, controlling outcomes. He paused. But you do not control this lift. Richard's eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic. Caleb stepped closer. You threatened her, Caleb said, nodding toward Nia. In my building, on my watch. Richard's mouth tightened. I warned her. Caleb's eyes hardened. You are done, Caleb said. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Security, Caleb said, voice steady. Richard Vance is to be removed from this building immediately. His access is revoked. If he resists, police. Richard laughed, but it had no warmth now. You think this is power, Richard said. This is theater. Caleb's voice didn't change. No, Caleb said. This is accountability. He ended the call and looked at Richard with a finality that made the air heavy. And since you like speaking calmly while you do ugly things, Caleb added, I'm going to fire you calmly too. Richard Vance, you are terminated. Effective now. Nia's breath caught. Ms. Carter's eyes widened. Richard's face hardened, and for the first time his mask slipped. He looked briefly, like a man who realized the floor beneath him had moved. The lift resumed. When the doors opened, 2 guards were waiting, not Richard's men. Richard tried to speak again, but Caleb raised one hand. No, Caleb said. You've spoken enough. Richard was escorted out. No shouting, no violence, just removal. Sometimes the most powerful moment is not a fight. It's a door closing and someone realizing they can't reopen it. Back upstairs, Caleb opened his private safe. Inside was a smaller file, personal, not company stamped, handwritten notes, a journal, a printed email thread. Caleb's eyes flicked across it and his face went still. Nia watched him. What is it? She asked. Caleb's voice was quiet. It's my father, he said. Nia blinked. Caleb swallowed. My father sat on the board during the early Meridian years, Caleb said. I always thought he was a figurehead, a name. He looked at Nia. But he wrote notes, he said. He questioned the trial numbers. He wrote that something felt wrong. He hesitated, then continued. And then, Caleb said, he wrote that he was being pressured to stay quiet. Nia's chest tightened. Caleb's voice dropped. And then he wrote, if anything happens to Monroe, we are all complicit. Silence. Rain tapped the glass again. Ms. Carter exhaled shakily. Nia stared at Caleb. This was the part where powerful men get defensive. This was the part where they protect family legacies. This was the part where truth becomes negotiable. Caleb's eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. He just stared at the page like it was a mirror. I never knew, he whispered. Nia's voice came out gentle but firm. Now you do, she said. Caleb nodded once. Then he did what very few people in his position ever do. He chose to burn down the lie, even if the flames singed his own name. Within 48 hours, Caleb announced an independent review. Within a week, former executives were subpoenaed. Within 2 weeks, the story hit the press, not as a rumor, as a timeline, as documents, as testimony, Nia's testimony. She sat in a courtroom with fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired, and she told the story that had been sealed, buried, and mocked. She spoke of Elias, of patience, of the quiet intimidation, of the way they wrote her off as unstable because she refused to play polite, and this time, she was not alone. Ms. Carter testified too. So did an IT contractor who admitted he was paid to clean servers. And then, the final blow. A digital analyst pulled up the cached search result, the deleted file, not the full file. But enough, a title, a snippet, a timestamp, and a matching audio pattern on an internal archive, a voice on tape, laughing, saying words that made the room go silent, make it look accidental. The courtroom didn't need blood to understand violence. There are some sentences that kill reputations the way a fire kills oxygen. Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, Nia's hands shook, not because she was afraid, because she was finally free. After the verdict, after the headlines, after the resignations and arrests and settlements, Naya stood outside the courthouse under a pale winter sky. Caleb approached slowly, no entourage, no show. He stopped a respectful distance away. "I owe you an apology," he said. Naya looked at him. "For what?" she asked. Caleb's face tightened. "For benefiting from a system that nearly broke you," he said. "For not looking sooner. For not asking what it cost to keep the building shiny." Nia nodded slowly. "I don't need your guilt," she said. "I need change." Caleb nodded. "You'll get it." He paused. "I also owe you something else," Caleb said. Nia's eyes narrowed. "What?" Caleb's voice was steady. "A seat," he said, "on the new oversight board, paid, independent, protected." Nia blinked. For a moment, the old instinct screamed at her to refuse, because power offered can be another trap. But then she remembered the lift, the moment he stopped it, the moment he chose accountability over comfort. Naya exhaled. "I'll do it," she said, "but understand something." Caleb waited. "If you try to use me as a shield," Naya said, "I will become a sword." Caleb held her gaze. "Good," he said quietly. "That's exactly what we need." Months later, Nia sat at a desk in a modest office with a window that looked out at the city. Not a luxury office, a working office, files stacked, reports printed, people coming in and out who actually listened. On her laptop, she searched the old project code again, almost out of habit. Project Meridian. The results were different now. Articles, public records, court documents. But then her eyes caught something. A link that shouldn't exist. A title she had never seen before. Same formatting as the cached snippet from before. Same strange spacing. It was faint, like a ghost in the search results. Naya clicked it. The page didn't load. It vanished. But she had seen it. Her pulse quickened. She took a screenshot. Then she leaned back slowly. Because the part nobody tells you about truth is this. Sometimes the first lie is not the last one. Sometimes someone keeps a copy. Sometimes someone hides a second file. Sometimes the story has one more layer. And that was the seed. The one that said, quietly, there might be a part 2. Nia looked out at the city lights and thought about Elias. She thought about the cold night she walked into a lobby just to survive. She thought about a lift that became a courtroom before any judge ever entered. And she thought about the lesson that stayed with her, the one she would never forget. Systems do not change because they are asked nicely. They change when someone refuses to be erased. So if you take anything from this story, take this. Your voice matters, even when people with polished shoes try to make it sound small. Truth has a cost, but silence has a higher one, and accountability is not revenge. It is protection for the next person who walks in from the cold. If this story moved you, comment, "I won't be erased," and tell me where you're listening from. And if you want more stories where dignity wins and real accountability catches up, like subscribe and stay with this channel.